Now we're coming back to gay laws. We're coming back to segregation laws because we are giving states a choice. But we know what choice red states are going to make, and that's the fucking problem. Yo, it's SHiR-0, this is SHiR-0's TV, and welcome to the first installment of the Anarchy Hour. I want you guys to get an understanding of my political compass, so we're going to take the political compass test. It's my understanding personally, as I've shaped my views over the years, that I am what people would call a secular humanist. If that is not true, we're going to find that out in the political compass test, where I actually lie on the scale, but it's my understanding that I lie in the progressive area of politics. I want what is generally better for humanity as a whole, and that means usually uplifting those in poverty, in not so great positions, because the people who actually have money can bet on their money and bet against their capital, and they can be self-sustaining in that manner. But people who are told to raise themselves from their bootstraps, I find that to be antithetical to the way that we engage as a society if we are going to have a government, right? But let's do the political compass, and it's going to be asking, I believe, 64 separate different questions that test where I lie politically. All right, here we go. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. This is a strongly agree. I literally just explained this. We need to do what's best for the common good. We need to do better for the little guy. And when I say the little guy, I mean the destitute and the homeless and people who are making poverty wages. These people need to be uplifted by the government. That's what the government is there for. People have a misconception about the government, it seems to me, about its functions and what it should be doing, and certainly the government does not do the full range of capabilities that it is capable of helping people around. That's why people don't like the government, for different reasons, and we can get into that. But at the end of the day, I strongly agree with that. We should not be serving corporations. We should be making sure that corporations and billionaires and millionaires pay into taxes that help the poor people. Because at the end of the day, if you give money to rich people, they will find a way to hoard it like Smaug. They are not going to reinvest it unless it's reinvesting in their own capital. Number 2, I'd always support my country whether it is right or wrong. Strongly disagree. I think the country is wrong in many aspects a lot of the time. So even though people have a tendency to say, hey, you don't like a country, you should get out of here.
Hey, all you un-American bastards! If you don't like America, why don't you get out?
I think that's antithetical to the way that we need to be dealing with society and moving forward, right? If you want something to change, you should be able to protest for change. You shouldn't have to fall in line with some crazy shit that the government is saying when it's bullshit. That is the case a lot of the time, because the government creates their own narrative, and a lot of the time authoritarian structures tend to not lead us in the right direction, not to lead humanity in the right direction. Number 3, no one chooses their country of birth, so it is foolish to be proud of it. I think I disagree lightly with this, and that's just because pride is malleable. I think that George Carlin makes a good point when he says that pride is something you should reserve for achievements.
Because to me, pride should be reserved for something you achieve or attain on your own.
But I think black pride is one of those exceptions where it's like, okay, you're not just black, you're black because of the way that you are treated in the experiences you go through in life, becoming a minority and presenting not only as a minority, but being treated as a minority. And you can be proud in the color of your skin, the same way you can be proud of the country that you were born in, without any sort of say in the matter. I mean, there are so many proud Americans, as you well know, but there are so many people who are just proud nationalists and proud patriots from their own countries, and they love being proud of their countries, and that's fine. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. I just see a problem with ultra-nationalism, where we're downing other countries because we are saying we're such a great country. Number 4, our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Okay, well, America is several races, so I would strongly disagree with that. No race is superior to another. That's kind of wild, because Americans as a race are sort of non-existent. American is sort of a conditioning, if you will. Number 5, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, I think that's really vague, and it all depends on context. Like, a friend, I don't know necessarily. I don't know about that. Number 6, military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. No, I strongly disagree with this. We're dealing with this right now with our sanctioning of the Gazan genocide.
Hello, I'm the United States. And I'm Israel. With you behind me, I can do whatever I want. Well, I want you. Take me. No, this is wrong. We both have the same father, Satan.
That is literally what it is, and I'm not here to debate that fact. I'm just here to tell you that military operating against international law, against the Nuremberg Code, if you are defying these things, then you are creating war crimes, you are creating humanitarian crisis. We should listen to international law because it's about respecting human dignity at that point, like desecrating graves and things of that nature, ultra violence that even war cannot abide. These things should not be overlooked. It's a slippery slope when we overlook these things, as you may well know right now. Next one. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I strongly agree, but it's been a long time coming with that because mainstream media has been sensationalized for a really long time.
Adult stuff, adult stuff, adult stuff. The world is scary. Adult stuff, adult stuff. Scary people yelling in another part of the world. Adult stuff.
So it's been the nature of news in America to be sensationalized and to propagate fear, to invite clicks. That's why Donald Trump made a huge point when he was saying, oh, you're not getting the ratings you want, or you're old news, and just making that statement affects the momentum of news spaces like that. They are being left behind, and it's certain, and I think that when they realize that, they scratch and claw for anything they can. But at the end of the day, places like CNN,
a lot of people had a lot of mistrust on the tariff issue. Economy's on fire. Indexes all-time highs. Every country on earth wants to cut a deal with America. The average person at the kitchen table is not worrying about Epstein. Don't give a damn. They want to provide for their family, and they are.
Places like Fox News.
This is why the criticism doesn't matter to us when you call us Nazis. Nazi this, Nazi that.
These places are simply trying to hold your attention. They are not about maintaining the truth. They are not about exposing reality. It's simply about muddling the facts and propagating fear to keep you tuned in, to make sure that you always have your ear to the television. All right, on to page 2. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. This is certainly the case, but I'm not going to go strongly agree, simply because I think that we can naturally, in a tribalistic manner, we can separate ourselves through nationality. And, you know, it's a defense mechanism, in a sense, to be a certain race and to, you know, gravitate towards people of your race. It's very possible that you might do that to find some camaraderie. There's always that connection that black people have with each other that is inherently there. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes we create this us versus them aesthetic, and that's certainly true. And we can get bogged down in trying to uplift our own races.
Are you totally against interracial relationships?
I am totally against it, and I want to make sure you understand why.
And that changes the fact that class supplants nationality. So that's sort of my issue with this question, is that people are ultimately divided more by class than nationality, but people don't think that at times. You know what I mean? The public consciousness overwrites the actual reality of the situation at times. All right. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. This is a strongly disagree. Inflation is simply a concept. The debt ceiling is simply a concept. We don't need to prioritize these things. We just need to make sure that we're not spending like fucking crazy or gutting programs that inherently help us as a nation. You know what I mean? I think this hyper focus that you see from Republicans on the deficit, it doesn't matter when they want to bail people out on Wall Street.
If money is evil, then that building is hell. This is the most obnoxious group of money-hungry, low IQ, high energy, jackrabbit, fucking wannabe, big time, small time, shit talking, bothersome, irritating bunch of motherfuckers.
But it matters when they want to give kids food. You know what I mean? It's fucking ridiculous. All right, next question. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. This is a strongly agree. Read Jane Meyer. Read anything about hyper-capitalists. They are simply trying to grind the world into dust and profit from the remains, from the debris, what's left of society.
We no longer the earth, we DP it.
And because of that, that's where regulation comes from. People trying to, let out toxic chemicals into the environment, no matter how many people get cancer, it means nothing to them. It's simply about a means to an end. It's about how much profit can we rake out if we dump these chemicals into the ocean or the air or start affecting wildlife and forestation, everything. I mean, the administration right now is trying to sell off public land in order to drill on it. I mean, there is no concern for the environment at all right now, and it's because corporations want to run rampant, and they're being allowed to.
You're about to experience the hard knocks of a free market, bitch. Get ready to feel it where it hurts.
Slowly but surely. Next one. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. I'm not really sure what this is quoting specifically, but if you're saying, you need to fit in where you feel you fit best, I mean, I think that's fundamentally makes sense to me, but if I'm misinterpreting that, I hope that doesn't mess up my interpretation of the entire thing. The freer the market, the freer the people. This is a strong disagree. Look, Ben Shapiro talks about shit like this all the time, and hyper-capitalists and capitalists always speak about the free market. There's nothing free about it. The freedom is in financial ruin. They are free to financially ruin whoever they feel like without being stopped. There are no regulations to stop some of the people who are going to absolutely exploit anyone and everyone they can for a crumb of capital. And that is the case when we have no regulations. The free market is simply a free-for-all for the spoils that can be generated. And sooner or later, everything will be commoditized. And then we will simply be seeing who gets what as far as the earth goes. Next one. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now bottled, branded consumer product. There's a truth to that, but I also think that sometimes, as much as I want to strongly agree with that, it's like you have a situation in Flint where Flint can't get any help to actually fix their pipes or anything. They just getting a stopgap of Nestle water, and there is something to say about Nestle doing something insidious like that, and that speaks to why I wouldn't strongly agree with this exactly, because even though places like Nestle do that, they are the stopgap between just drinking poisoned water. It's not a solution, it's just a stopgap. America is very fond of stopgaps and not actual solutions, and that's unfortunate. But I think that bottled water is often better than the faucets in America, unless you trust your water system, which I wouldn't, especially in a desert. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I strongly agree with this. I'm not really sure how deep I really need to go about this. The housing market is in shambles because corporations are buying properties and trying to lease them out for profit. And this emphasis on owning land is simply only so that they can exploit that land for purposes of power and leverage. And at the end of the day, I go by the hippie logic of no one can really own land, like the same way borders are simply a concept. You know what I mean? No one is really separated. We create create these physical barriers that trick us into thinking that we are separated when we are not. We are all connected, certainly. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. This is true, especially in America, especially where the rich are pulling most of the weight. There are very few rich people that would make up a majority of the lower class, and the disparity is only growing. And that's because of the oligopoly of corporations, plutocracy, where the rich basically own the board and they make up the rules. And the only way you could fight them is with capital, but poor people don't have capital, so it's sort of checkmate. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. What is protectionism? Okay, so there is an argument for protectionism, I guess, just not the way that Trump does it with his tariffs. You know, tariffs are used for specific reasons, not willy-nilly. You know, there's a reason, time, and place for everything, just not blasé. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver profit to its shareholders. No, that is exactly what resulted in the society we live in now. If companies weren't trying to just satisfy their shareholders, then the company would be able to operate properly. Focus on efficiency. When you're focusing on your bottom dollar, you're not focusing on your workers, you're not focusing on your customers, you're just simply focusing on money flow. And that is when you start to lose your fucking self. You start to lose the bigger picture. I don't know how many times I've been employed at a place and they simply just didn't try to instill morale. And because of that, they would have insane recidivism rates, especially in places like Amazon. The rich are too highly taxed. I strongly disagree. They are not taxed enough. I now fall in line with Sam Cedar's belief that we shouldn't have any billionaires, that above a certain millionth dollar, we should start taxing them outright, and we would be able to solve so many problems if that were the case. I mean, all of the taxes that are not even collected because of tax loopholes that are taken advantage of by the rich are why we are not getting the kind of funding that we deserve for certain things. We could actually fund a lot of these things people say are unnecessary if that were the case. These things that are proclaimed unimportant because what's important to these people are simply how much they can keep from getting taxed. I read somewhere in Jane Mayer's book about dark money that someone like Charles Koch, who is a huge millionaire-billionaire guy, made huge waves in politics for the right wing and right-wing ideology, setting it up for things like PragerU as of late, just like Daily Wire as of late, just like Turning Point USA, these sort of things. These people believe in no charity being the biggest charity.
I put hope in there. Hope. Don't spend it all in one place, Raggy.
They think everyone should just try to stand on their own, and those who win are the winners of society, and those who lose simply deserve to die.
Everybody does it. Liberals, conservatives, doesn't matter. This is America. You're either a duper or a dupee.
That is the hyper-capitalist point of view. That is really how they feel about you. So, are they too highly taxed? That's not true. They are getting out of taxes, and they should be paying more, and they usually are. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of Medicare. No, this is not true. We should base our service of medical care based upon the need, not based upon access to need. Like, Medicare should not be EA Sports. You know what I mean? EA Games is not the Medicare system. It is now, but that is not a Medicare system you want. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Strongly agree. Very straightforward. You should not be able to be a snake oil salesman. You should not be able to scam people out of money just because you're trying to make a profit. That's simple. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. I think I read that right. A free market, in theory, would have to include some sort of regulation on the people that are trying to exploit such a system. Because at the end of the day, a free market is one with no holds bar. That's the point. So if we have people trying to go willy-nilly, we still need to be able to rein those fuckers in. All right, page 3. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Strongly disagree. disagree. You should never be able to tell a woman if she can or cannot have abortion. This is a fact of life. It is her body. It should be her choice. It's that simple. I don't care about your religious affinities. It's got nothing to do with that. At the end of the day, when people say it should go back to the states, it's a nonsense term. It was already decided in the Supreme Court. It set insane precedent to turn it over this far back into the game. And there's something to be said about how disgusting it was to do something like that to women. Because at the end of the day, giving it back to states' rights was only restricting more women's rights. That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And the same can be said of all of the Republican legislation being passed only in the hyper red states in the Bible Belt of certain. Now we're coming back to gay laws. We're coming back to segregation laws because we are giving states a choice. But we know what choice red states are going to make, and that's the fucking problem. The red states are going to choose for people who are not Republicans in their red states. Not everyone is Republican in a red state. You are oppressing those who do not share your values. That is why, originally, it was better to be able to make the choice yourself. But we are simply making it seem as though restricting women's rights is giving them more rights, which is completely antithetical to where we need to be going as a society. We need to reinstill Roe v. Wade. We need to find a way to allow women to get the procedures that they ask for, because no one should be forced into motherhood. No matter how fucking good you think it is to be a mother, it's not something you should force on someone. That's 18 years of your life. That is nonsensical to force on someone. When you're not ready to provide for that child, when you are not going to get support from the government for that child, it is absolutely insane to ask a woman to carry to term with everything that brings into that life. Unacceptable. All authority should be questioned. I agree. I mean, we can't just have unquestionable authority. I mean, at the end of the day, we need to question the police because the police do not regulate themselves properly. That is the fact, and that's the perfect example. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I think a lot of the times this works, but I'm putting regular agree because at the end of the day, when it comes to something like prison, an eye for an eye I don't think really works all the time. There are specific cases and specific circumstances that should not call for equal punishment. I think that we need to focus more on rehabilitation than we need to focus on punishment. If we're focused on punishment, we're trying to match the crime. We're not trying to figure out what is just, right? So that's my issue there with the eye for an eye. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I disagree. I think museums and theaters are a public staple for American society. I think we pay for a lot of things with our taxes that we're not quite aware of, but that doesn't make them unnecessary. I think museums are really important for informational basis and just a recreational activity. Same thing with theaters. These are public works, public arts. They should be supported by the public. I don't think there's anything controversial about that. Schools should not make class attendance compulsory. I would disagree simply because I think you can easily be truant. If you know that you're not gonna face a consequence by ditching school, you'll just leave. I think that's the case with like college. You know you're not gonna get in trouble, so maybe you don't show up for any of your classes. But in like lower grades, in like elementary, in middle school and high school, this is necessary, you know, to curb that sort of behavior. I think there need to be consequences, certainly. All people have their rights, but it's better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Wow, that's a disgusting thing to say. I don't even know what that means. We all have the same rights. We're all humans. That seems like an ignorant statement. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I mean, I was spanked. I think there's some sort of discipline that's necessary, but I think the paddle is going too far. Like, some violence is like overt, and I think you don't necessarily learn from violence as much as it quiets you or it suppresses your being. I think there can be drawbacks to spanking and just trying to solve everything with violence, no matter how light it is. But I think sometimes it is called for. I think sometimes kids are for sure out of line and they don't know anything better than to just not get smacked upside the head, but like to take something, some sort of, even if it's like a flick, like seriously. Sometimes you got babies kids and they gotta be disciplined. That's how it is. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from the parents. I think that's natural. I think it's unhealthy, but I think it's natural for kids to not always be honest with their parents. Kids lie to their parents all the time, whether that's small or whether that's big, you know what I mean? Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I agree with this for certain reasons, certain inebriated reasons, but genuinely, it's one of those things that I don't think you should be criminally charged for having possession of, especially when it's legal in certain states. I think you shouldn't be charged for having any drugs on you unless it's like a crazy amount. If you have a crazy amount of like weed, or you have a crazy amount of meth, like shit like that, that's an extenuating circumstance, okay? Like you gotta make an exception for the guy who's clearly doing a drug bust. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. I think this is true. I think if we're talking about whether that job is a job and whether that job is a career, there's something to be said there, but at the end of the day, you do need to seek some sort of employment. I mean, that stretches as far as just being a streamer and making some sort of income. But at the end of the day, I think that school should be preparing you for whatever you're trying to engage in society. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Wow, how disgusting of a thing to say. I think some of these are bound to just trap amoral people, I guess. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. No. I think this is the exact opposite of the other question I was talking about how kids should be punished. I think kids shouldn't just accept discipline. I think sometimes it goes too far, and you have to be able to know where the line is and what's inappropriate violence and what's inappropriate punishment. There are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. Yes, this is true. How you are raised and your experiences shape who you are. It's got nothing to do with anything else. All right, we project a lot of things onto ourselves, but that is not who we are. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I disagree with this. I think there's a crazy mentality we have here in America that has to do with everyone should be working as hard as me, which is really fucking crazy and it's really disgusting. I think some of us aren't really as built for work. As crazy as that sounds to some people aren't built to work 9 to 5 days. Some people are not built to be confined to a desk. And actually, most people aren't.
It's not an adventure. It's just work. And the bottom line is some people are okay going to work and some people would rather die.
And most people aren't built for the structured lifestyle that is layered onto society. And we should be more forgiving to people who don't want to work because they don't want to work for the same reason you don't want to work. I just think it's just harder for some people to commit to the rat race as others can. Like, you want better for society. And I think when society is one way and you're another, you would immediately be singled out. You would immediately be discriminated against on those principles. That happens in America. You know, I say this and I've said it before. You're getting your money up or you're getting your funny up. People look at you as a joke if you're not trying to squeeze every last ounce of work out of your week, because it makes you look like you don't want to get anywhere. It makes you look unproductive. You know, in the sense of Japan, even though Japan is much different in this sense, right? But there is that echo of, hey, what are you doing with your life if you're not committing to work? When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. No, that's nonsense. I think sometimes we can dwell on negative things, but if you really have an issue and you're trying to just cover it up with positive emotions, I think that's kind of crazy. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their country. Totally disagree. Anyone can come here and understand America. Anybody can assimilate anywhere. We're human beings. We all adapt. It's crazy to say that. You want to learn the language of wherever you're at, you can become a citizen there. It's that simple. We just pigeonhole people into different roles. And because of that, it creates circumstances that are out of people's control in society as far as the way they're treated. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. No, of course not. Because at the end of the day, the corporation is looking out for their bottom dollar, and that means to pump out as much misery as possible. That's not a one-to-one comparison, but you know exactly what I mean when I say, hey, efficiency is going to go way higher, we're gonna make more money, but it's gonna piss off the workers. But who gives a fuck? Because we're paying them minimum wage. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. I disagree. Public broadcasting is extremely important, you know, so we should be funding that the same way we fund theaters, the same way that we fund public arts. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Yes, this is bread and butter. This is one of the biggest problems in America, for sure. There is a great book called The Manchurian Candidate. You can read it, and it's all about how we create this boogeyman out of communism, out of socialism, you know, trying to otherize places like China and Russia, to demonize these places in order to make ourselves look more promising. But we are part of the imperial core as the other powers are, and we have our baggage just like anyone else does, if not the most, for the things that we have done in the past. And it's very Orwellian and very clear that in the name of something like the war on terror, a lot of civilians had to die. A lot of innocent Islamic people had to die based upon American hatred for crimes that they had not committed. This is a fact. And there's a lot of times when things like the Patriot Act, they pass because we're in a time of great distress, and the American government wants to exploit that distress and make it seem like we're doing some freedom fighting shit, when really we're just stripping more of your rights one by one, slowly but surely. And that's what the Manchurian Candidate does. It says, oh, we're gonna descend into communism if we don't seize the powers that be. You know what I mean? A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. No, I would almost agree with this, but at the end of the day, it's not an advantage, because functioning as only one state, it can only have one truth, and the one truth is that it's simply trying to deify itself. You know what I mean? So just because you have one line of reasoning in a one-party state, that doesn't make it just at all. And so that's why I would go disagree. I won't strongly disagree, because that is a perk, but everything surrounding a one-party state is not a perk, and so inherently that brings into question even that part. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. No, I strongly disagree. People have learned how to exploit the internet for their personal gain, the same way that robocalls eventually infested smartphones. You know what I mean? There's plenty of people who are just being taken advantage of because they do not have the tech savvy to not get scammed. And that's really, really detrimental to where we're going in this internet age, the age of electronics. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I think this is true. I won't strongly agree, because I'm back and forth with that, because I think if you're a mass shooter and you killed several people, there's no way to atone for what you've done. There's plenty of people who are not guilty. They don't feel any sort of shame. They don't feel any remorse. Those people, I think there's nothing you can do for them. There's something to be said about that for the death penalty, but I think you should bring it out rarely, because the ability to take someone's life is really, really heavy. And sometimes it's misappropriated, or people are charged falsely and end up being sentenced to death innocent. There have been plenty of instances of this happening, even forced, albeit. But I think for the most part, you shouldn't apply it, but it should be applied in certain scenarios. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Civilized? No. I don't think civilized society has anything to do with people on the top and people on the bottom. Egalitarian living is very possible. Like, there's plenty of ways to live in a society that benefits everyone, instead of giving the top class the majority of the benefits and leaving the people on the bottom with the crumbs. That just happens to be the way society organizes itself when there's a surplus of resources resources in certain camps and not in others. And then that creates the disparities slowly but surely. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. I strongly disagree. I mean, it's abstract art. Like, you know, the thing about art is that it's open to interpretation. The idea that abstract art has it represents nothing is totally antithetical to the point of art. It represents itself. I mean, I don't need to go into that. It sort of goes like cyclical, but you know what I mean. Art always has a purpose, even if it doesn't. That is its purpose. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. No. Punishment is not going to get the reaction that you're looking for. Rehabilitation is. We want people reintegrated into society. What we don't want is recidivism. We don't want people cycling back into jail, creating a cycle of negativity, creating a possibility for more bad things to occur. We need to stop treating being sent to prison like a stain on your humanity, all right? Because people can't move forward and you fall back into a cycle of crime when you can't reintegrate into society properly. And it seems that because of our punishment system in the prison system, that these people don't get rehabilitated when they were released, and they fall back into the same patterns for these exact reasons. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. I agree, some criminals are criminals, and they will always be criminals. You can't rehabilitate everyone, so I softly agree with that. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. No, I'll disagree with this lightly because I'm the artist. Only thing I care about in life is really art and politics. For the most part, you know, art comes in many forms, but at the end of the day, I think that there's a place in the world for the businessman and the manufacturer, because not everybody can be the writer and the artist. All right, you know, there's plenty of people who just have a good work ethic, or they are in leadership roles and they know how to direct people. There are plenty of services that are necessary that aren't exactly liberating, but they get done because there's responsible people out there, and we need those people in this world. Mothers have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. No, that's kind of crazy. That's a really crazy thing to say. I think mothers are forced into the role of creating the perfect environment for their child because they're responsible for a life. But the idea that you can't be your own person, you can't be your own individual because you have to focus on a child, and you can't focus on your career. Learn how to balance the two. Time management is extremely important for parents. You have to be able to balance your own existence with cultivating another person's existence. And maybe sometimes that means focusing less on your career and more on your child, and vice versa. But you should never belittle your vocation just because you are a mother now. Like, we need to stop thinking about my career because now I have a baby I need to think of. You can think of both. You do not have to create an ultimatum for yourself. Just know when to step back from one or the other for some breathing room. Almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should heed the warnings of climate science that growth is detrimental to our efforts to curb global warming. There's some level of agreement I have with this, because what I won't agree with is exponential growth for the sacrifice of the environment. That is unacceptable to me. These hyper-capitalists that want to destroy everything now for profit now, it's heinous. It's insane. There is no going back from environmental destruction. That's why I find it so crazy that we've been able to completely change the narrative on climate science as though it's some sort of junk science. It's kind of fascinating, the hate that climate change gets, and the amount of climate denial that just goes willy-nilly and is completely unvarnished nonsense and ignorance that we will be paying for in the long run, or at least the future children will. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. No. I think you should always, much like institutions, they should be questioned. You should question certain universities because some of them are scams. You should question some establishments because they are trying to exploit you. Astrology accurately explains many things. That's really fucking funny because this is trying to catch all the fucking holistic motherfuckers out here. Astrology is not astronomy. Astrology is the study of the stars. It doesn't explain anything. It only explains what you allow it to explain. That is my verdict. I don't do signs. People are much much more complex than they would like to lead on and believe that they are these few characteristics for this day because they read their horoscope. You know what I mean? You pigeonhole your complexity as a human being by saying, oh, I'm a Libra or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? You cannot be moral without being religious. Strongly disagree. I'm personally of the belief you have stronger morals if you are devoid of religion. Like, if you just keep the principles and get rid of the stories, I mean, you're golden. The idea that you can't have morals without religion is nonsense. There's a lot of morality posing in the Bible. There's a lot of grandstanding as far as morality goes when it comes to religious people that think they are better than others, and there's something to be said about that. But I find that those who are more focused on reason are more focused on, hey, let's just do what the right thing is to do, and not because Jesus fucking said so, you know what I mean? Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping genuinely disadvantaged. No, that is not the case. We should provide genuine support. Charity is not the case. Charity is simply optional. Charity is something that should be done all the time, but is not. People decide what they want to give into charity. Social Security is a need and necessary. It should be expanded and not cut to death like it is trying to be right now. But at the end of the day, charity is necessary and it helps, but banking on charity is disingenuous because you will not get it in a capitalistic society as long as it's optional. It's exactly why we have taxes. As much as people don't like them, they pay for things and get shit done. But at the end of the day, charity can also be perverted by dark money, and that is certain. Plenty of places that are pretending to be philanthropists and they're pretending to be goody two-shoes organizations are manipulating things behind the scenes, and that's the case with plenty of corporations funding think tanks or giving money to certain people to allocate those funds to create propaganda. These things are certain, and it happens through Trojan horses like charity. But genuine charity is great. There's nothing to be said about a genuine good heart when you are donating to a good cause. But as far as charity being better than Social Security, no, that is security. It is vital. Charity is something done either in hopes of something or out of excess care. Some people are naturally unlucky. No, I think people get put in unlucky circumstances and sometimes you just get fucked. That's life. Life, sometimes people just have bad cards and they hit every branch all the way down the failed tree. It happens. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. No. That's indoctrination. That's fucking crazy. Nonsense. You shouldn't even be imposing your own religious beliefs on your children. Let them decide for themselves what they believe. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. No, that's fucking ridiculous. Dude, sex is sex. If you want to tag on any extra bullshit onto it, it's because you're trying to instill your values in other people, and that's wrong. That's extremely wrong. I'll never understand how people who are like hyper religious and view sex as this, not that it isn't sacred, but the idea that it's this lofty view or some crazy thing just because you hyper fixate on it does not make it not a biological function. It happens. Like, even when I was in high school, like, chicks, a lot of them were Mormon. Those motherfuckers did anal all the time and they thought it wasn't sex. Bro, sex is normal. It's a normal part of life. And they're probably freakier because they were doing anal in high school and not sex at all. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a give and take. But at the end of the day, sex is normal. It's human. It is animalistic. It's something that almost everyone partakes in. But if you decide to turn it into a taboo, you know what? You will respond in a manner that treats it that way. A same-sex couple is stable. Loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Yes, exactly. If you're well-adjusted, you're well-adjusted, and you deserve to be able to have kids. There's plenty of gay people who have straight kids, or they just have kids in general, and they're fine. A home is a home, no matter if it's two dads, two moms, a mom and a dad. There's just like these expectations of society that get layered on to people's lives. Even though everyone is not a monolith, even though everyone does not represent the same values, everybody doesn't want the white picket fence with the 2 kids and the house with the lien on it. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for adult population. Yes, I think not only that, but we need to find regulation in the sex industry. We need to broach politics with that, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the industry that's rather exploitative, and we need some sort of laws for that. And I hear about porn stars always advocating for some sort of laws to help them out, but at the end of the day, I think this taboo, like I say about this taboo we have around sex, we have around especially pornography. Even though so many people watch pornography, people pretend they don't, but it's like breathing air for a lot of people. Like, a lot of horny motherfuckers out there, and they're watching it for sure. Like, even gay senators who claim that they're homophobic, and then you find that they're on Grindr, bro. Like, it's just, you know, they don't know how to be honest with themselves, and I think that's the hugest barrier to pornography laws. All right, but we still need them. There needs to be some sort of maturity to address these problems, because they exist. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Exactly. Especially if you're trying to check genitals to see if someone is a male or female. Like, seriously, these things are ridiculous. Gender is certainly a social construct, because there's a difference between gender and sex. You can appear to be a male and biologically not be a male, but you present as male. It's that simple. I mean, we're getting a lot of problems with bathroom coats and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, gender is ambiguous, and you can see someone identify as a woman and not know that that may not be the case. But we don't need to invade other people's privacies. I think the real problem is that we're trying to paint trans people as other, and in doing so, whether they go in the male or female bathroom, they will face ridicule, and that's problematic. And I think that an extension to this statement not only is what's going on in a private bedroom of no business of the state, how you identify is no fucking business of the state, to be quite honest with you. Because if a trans woman can trick a straight man into bed, then gender is a construct, certainly. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Strongly disagree. That's crazy. Who the fuck says that? That's nonsense. That's some religious bullshit. I mean, if you have the homophobia on the degree of just saying that, there's something fucking wrong with you. All right, last question. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Strongly disagree. I think sometimes in music, people can get a little raunchy. I think it's gone to a deviant place, but I think that's natural for the progression of sexual repression in this country. I mean, the same way I brought up pornography, I think at the end of the day, we try to contain sex, and because we try to do that and we try to pigeonhole it into certain places, even though we sell sex on a daily basis in America, I mean, through advertisements.
What's more American than a cheeseburger? In the hands of all-American model Samantha Hoops. In a hot tub. In a pickup truck. Driven by an American bull rider. On an aircraft carrier. Under the gaze of Lady Liberty.
It's pretty crazy the way that we demonize sex as well. And there's sort of a feedback loop effect in that. Like, the more we try to otherize sex and these things we call deviant behaviors, the more they manifest. Something of a Streisand effect. But these have been the questions. It looks like we've answered them all. Let's see where I stand on the political compass. This isn't telling me anything. Oh, okay, so this is my compass. And just a disclaimer, as you've read up here, we'll go over this again, that this isn't necessarily made to understand a person's social attitude. It's focused more on economics. But let's scratch that and look at where I stand personally. Because we have a very left-leaning individual here, and this is exactly where I expect myself to land. Because at the end of the day, I am a secular humanist. I care about what the greater good is. The greater good is going to be the working class. It's going to be the lower class. We need to lift these people up into a place that is beyond poverty. That is my belief. That's my mission. My mission is simply world peace and equality for all. And we can bring people to a certain baseline without belittling anyone. And as we bring these people up from the lower class, I think it shrinks the upper class as well. And we find and people living better lives somewhere in the median range in general. That is what I find to be best. That's my belief. And you'll probably see that sentiment exposed as we go forward. But I wanted you all to understand where I'm coming from, and I wanted to see where I am coming from myself. And as you can see, rather lefty, rather big lefty, social libertarian, authoritarian, negative 6.41, left to right, negative 8.88. This has been SHiR-0's Political Compass on SHiR-0's TV, on the Anarchy Hour. I will see you for all of the political content to come, and I will see you then. Peace.